In high school, there are always those mean girls, right? Well, turns out I was actually the mean girl, and it took something really awful for me to realize it. You see, I'm a pretty average kind of girl. Average looking, average grades, and I guess you could say I'm a little chubby. Yeah, I'm that invisible. But thank God, I had some good friends, so it's okay. I'm content with my mediocre life. But one day, I received a note in my locker. There's even a heart on it. My heart started beating so fast. Could it be? I read on and couldn't believe it. It was from a guy called Dave, and he was confessing his feelings for me. He even left his phone number. I was stunned. And then I got to the bottom of the note, and reality hit me smack bang in the face. "I'll be waiting for your call, Sarah." It wasn't for me. It was for Sarah. Of course it was for Sarah. All the boys fancied her. And who wouldn't? She was the prettiest girl in school. Plus her locker was right next to mine. So he just made a mistake. I was about to pop it in her locker when I saw her walking towards me. I tried to hide my disappointment that the note hadn't been for me. It drove me crazy to see her bouncing towards me with her blonde, curly hair and gorgeous smile. When she saw me, she started making small talk and even complimented me on my cardigan. It was so weird. What's so good about that to talk about? Was that compliment a kind of sarcasm or something? This angelic girl always gave me uneasy feelings. I bet she's that type of mean girl that's just being nice to your face, then later comes home and puts your name in her burn book. After she walked away, I scrunched up the note and threw it in my bag. Later that night, I did something insane. I texted Dave, pretending to be Sarah. I don't know why I did it, but after a few texts back and forth, it actually became quite fun. I looked him up on social media, and I couldn't believe how handsome he was. He was a year older, and so his classes were in another building. No wonder I hadn't noticed him before. Even our cafeterias were in different buildings, so he'd probably never seen me either. Not that he would notice me anyway, though. I felt so wild messaging him. I'd never done anything like this before, and it actually felt quite fun to pretend to be Sarah. I could just talk to him so freely and didn't have to overthink if I was sounding like a loser. Because in those moments, I was Sarah, the most popular girl in school, and it felt amazing. It didn't matter what I said, because I knew that David thought I was Sarah, and so everything I said to him was funny or cute. I even told my best friend Clara what I was doing, and she was amazed that I had the courage to do such a thing. I showed her our texts, and she was like, "Wow, girl, you are crazy." I continued to text him, though, and eventually, I found I couldn't stop. I didn't know how long I could keep it up before I got caught, but I figured I'd get bored before then anyway. But then one day, he asked me to meet him after school, and I froze. Obviously, I couldn't meet him, nor let him approach the real Sarah in real life. So I made up some excuse about how my parents were super strict, and I'd get in trouble if anyone saw us. But he insisted, saying he had a gift for me. So I told him to leave it on top of the vending machine for me instead. To my surprise, he thought this was a really romantic idea, and so he agreed. Throughout the next week, he left me a gift every day. One day, it was a small crystal in the shape of a rose. The next day, it was a book of poetry. That was sweet. I didn't expect such delicacy from a jock. And then he asked me to meet him at the basketball game that Friday. He sounded so serious. I guess his patience had run out. Well, of course, it would be too absurd to go to the same school, but didn't see each other at all for 2 weeks straight, right? I had no other choice but to agree. But then, the panic kicked in. It was the finale of a big tournament at school, so everyone was going. And Sarah will be there too. And if Dave saw her, no, it would just be a disaster. My life would be over if they knew what I'd been up to. I asked Clara what I should do, and she was like, "What? You haven't ended that catfishing thing yet? You need to tell him now, before it's too late." She'd called me a catfish. I was so offended, so I just stormed off and said I'd make my own plan without her help. I knew exactly what I was going to do. When I got home, I raided my mom's medicine cabinet and found it. Her laxative syrup. I poured a little into a fruity drink I'd bought. Obviously, I'd followed the instructions and only poured a little. I mean, I didn't want to knock Sarah out. I just wanted to give her enough so she'd miss the game. Little did I know how badly this was all going to unfold. When I got to school the next day, I made sure I was early and put it on Sarah's desk. I heard footsteps, though, and almost jumped out of my skin. Luckily, it was just Clara. And when she asked me what I was up to, I just said I'd seen a boy dropping this off on Sarah's desk and had felt jealous, so I'd taken a look. Sarah later took it without hesitation, since receiving gifts from secret admirers wasn't new to her. Well, success! After PE later that day, Sarah drank it. But then, disaster struck. Her friends also wanted a sip, so she passed it around. And to my complete horror, Clara had a sip too. I wanted to jump in and stop them, but I couldn't. In the next class, everyone kept running to the bathroom. It was so awkward. Luckily, Clara only had one bathroom trip, and then she was fine. She thought she'd just eaten something bad. If only she knew the truth. Sarah must have drunk much more than the others, because she still looked pale after several trips. During break, I went over to her and asked if she was okay. Then I suggested she go home and rest, and even offered to help her walk to her car. At that point, I was actually more worried for her than for my plan. But, well, my plan did work anyway. Later that night, Dave texted me saying he couldn't find me at the basketball game. Well, me, meaning Sarah. I told him I wasn't feeling well, and so he said he'd send me a gift the next day to make me feel better. Well, that was the moment Clara came over and confronted me. She busted into my room saying, "I know what you did. Isn't that too much?" Then she said she'd seen the syrup in my backpack. I was stunned. But then I just told her that it was time those mean girls got a taste of their own medicine. But she was furious. She said, "You're ridiculous. Sarah isn't a mean girl. She's so sweet. She's even nice to you. Are you that blinded by jealousy that you'd sink this low to hurt her? You know what? You're the only mean girl around here." At that, she stormed off, leaving me standing there all alone. I froze there, dumbfounded. What just happened? What did I just hear? Was I the mean girl? That couldn't be true, right? Was Clara even my friend? How could she say that to me? She kept calling me catfish, then mean girl. This girl was really too much. But her words kept lingering in my mind. I thought about it. Sarah really had never done me any harm. So why was I being so mean to her? It wasn't right of me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I felt so guilty. I'd really let things get out of control. Why was I even doing this? It's not like I even really liked Dave. Sure, it felt nice to have a cute guy talking to me, but he was only talking to me because he thought I was Sarah. I didn't know what I was trying to do anymore. The day after, Dave had left a new gift box on the vending machine. I kept looking at it and wasn't sure if I should take it. But then suddenly, a guy noticed it, took it down, and saw it was addressed to Sarah. Then he quickly ran to class and gave it to her. It all happened so quickly, I didn't even have time to react. I ran after him to see what would happen next. Sarah and her friends were all gathered around the box and kept saying, "Dave? Isn't he your crush? That Dave Miller? Wow, girl, congrats! But why did he leave a gift for you?" I could see Sarah was blushing, and that's when I realized she actually liked him. Oh my God, I'd messed everything up! She was so happy, which made me feel even worse. Clara was right. I was the mean girl, not Sarah. I had to act quick before Sarah found Dave and they both discovered the truth. I texted Dave and asked him to meet me at the park in secret. As soon as I arrived, I could see he was there already, excitedly waiting. I hid behind a tree from afar and called him, and then I asked him to let me explain first. I told him I wasn't Sarah, and that I'd been doing this because I was just tired of feeling like a loser. But I didn't expect I'd taken this all too far. "I'm so sorry," I said to him. He was so confused and kind of angry at first. But then, after a while, he said that back in middle school, he'd been a bit of a nobody. So he could understand where I was coming from, but he needed time to process it all. When he was about to hang up, I said, "Wait!" Then ran towards him and said I was the girl on the phone and that I had good news for him. that the real Sarah actually did like him too, and that all he needed to do was go and get her. He looked unsure and said, "You're not lying to me again, are you?" Then I said, "I swear, she's got the biggest crush on you. Please let me make up for this all. I'll help you." He looked so happy, and I felt better knowing I was helping this happy couple get together. They deserved each other. I even helped him choose out the next gift for Sarah. Yep, the actual Sarah this time. And ever since then, I kind of became his wingman. As for Clara, of course, I apologized to her and thanked her for being a good friend and for knocking some sense into me. And now, Sarah and Dave are officially a couple, and I even hang out with them sometimes. In fact, Dave's friend has been hitting on me, so let's see if anything happens there. Maybe I'll finally get a real boyfriend. I gripped onto the swing chains and stared down at my feet. Someone was walking over. It was Lydia. "What's up?" she asked as she sat on the swing next to me. "Hey." I managed a weak smile. "It's probably nothing. It's just, my parents have been arguing a lot. Then this morning, Mom smelled some unfamiliar perfume on Dad's shirt and accused him of cheating. Is he really having an affair?" Lydia rubbed my shoulder. "No way! Your dad probably just got caught in a spray mist cloud at the department store or something. You shouldn't jump to conclusions that quickly. Your dad loves your mom. Anyone can see that, so don't worry." I mumbled a yeah in agreement. My name's Cora, and as corny as it sounds, before this incident, I had been pretty satisfied with my life. I'm attending a renowned university. I get along really well with my parents, and despite being an only child, I've never felt lonely, as I have my best friend, Lydia, for company. She's more of a sister to me. Regardless of the problem, I just needed to drop her a message, then we'll meet at our spot, which is the swings at the park. Yep, I had it all, and I thought nothing would ever change that. It turns out that I was wrong. So it all began with my dad. He was acting oddly. He often looked at his phone, then smiled to himself. And then he'd take his phone into the bathroom and not come out for ages. This didn't go unnoticed by Mom, but when she asked him about it, he just shrugged and said that he had some problems with his digestion. Then, while Mom was doing the laundry, she smelt an unfamiliar perfume on his shirt. She marched over to him, threw the shirt at his head, and demanded that he explain himself. Dad denied it and said it was probably just his work colleague's perfume, and that she was overreacting. That's why I arranged to meet Lydia at our spot. And as usual, she was so sweet and supportive. Lydia was right. Maybe I had thought too much. I came home and caught Mom crying in the kitchen. She looked at me with puffy eyes and said, "Something isn't right. I just know it. He doesn't look at me like he used to." I sat down, hugged her, and said, "Mom, let's stop overthinking. I trust Dad. He'll never betray us." I stayed to comfort her for a while, then eventually she calmed down. The next evening, Dad came home with a big bouquet of blue roses, Mom's favorites. Then he cooked dinner for us both as an apology for making us sad. Mom looked touched, and she also apologized for misunderstanding him. I told myself that things would be okay now, right? For the next few weeks, Mom and Dad seemed to be fine. But then, on my mom's birthday, we invited Lydia and her mom Josie over for dinner. My mom was busy in the kitchen, so I took the birthday gift off of Josie for her. That's when I smelt it. Her perfume. It was the same scent that had been on Dad's shirt. I was sure of it. Over dinner, I noticed that Josie kept on looking over at my dad and laughed at all of his dumb jokes. Oh God, was my dad having an affair with my best friend's mom? I felt like I'd explode, but I couldn't say anything to Lydia, as I didn't want to upset her. So I'd do my best to avoid my best friend until I figured things out. This worked for a few days, but then one day after a class, she rushed over to me and said, "Cora, why are you avoiding me?" I pretended not to hear her and kept on walking, but she grabbed my arm and continued. "Did I do anything wrong? Will you please just tell me?" I spilled out, "I'm pretty sure that my dad's having an affair with your mom." At first, she looked shocked, but then she hugged me and kept on apologizing. It was all too much for me, and I burst into tears in her arms. She told me that she'd talk to her mom and find out what was going on. The next day, I met Lydia at our spot. She looked super awkward, then said, "It's true. My mom had a month-long affair with your dad, but she promised that it's over." My world came crashing down around me. I just couldn't believe it. Lydia hugged me and told me it'd be okay. I was so lucky to have such an awesome friend like her. We both decided it'd be best not to tell my mom. The affair was over, so why break my mom's heart now? I tried carrying on like normal, and for the next few weeks, it really felt like everything was okay. Dad was really sweet with Mom, and he even surprised her with a posh dinner out. But then, one afternoon, I saw Dad pacing the garden. He was on the phone with someone, and I heard him say, "Okay, I'm coming now." Then he got into his car and drove off. I decided to follow him, and it soon became clear where he was going. He pulled up in front of Josie's house and then walked straight inside without knocking. My heart sank. So he was still seeing her. Without a second thought, I called Mom and blurted out, "Mom, Dad's having an affair with Josie. I'm there now. Come and join me and we'll confront them together." 5 minutes later, my mom showed up. She looked both sad and furious. We went straight to the front door and banged on it, and I yelled out, "Open up! We both know about your dirty relationship!" But suddenly, someone spoke behind us. "Hey, Laura. Cora, is everything okay?" We turned around and saw Josie standing there with a grocery bag in her hand. I was about to tell Josie to stay away from my dad when Lydia opened the door and gave us confused looks. "What are you doing here?" "Oh, do you want your dad? He's fixing the dishwasher." Then Josie said, "Lydia, I told you to call a plumber out to fix it." "The plumber said he was fully booked today, so I think that I could ask Mr. Roberts for help," she replied. Oh no! So it turns out I'd misunderstood what was happening and messed everything up. Suddenly, my dad appeared in the doorway and said to us, "What's all this banging and shouting about?" "Right, we're all going home now to talk." As soon as we got home, Dad waved his arms about in anger, then yelled at Mom, "You're crazy, jealous, and unreasonable, and I can't be around you anymore." I felt so bad. This was my fault, not Mom's. So I tried explaining this to Dad, but he just told me it wasn't my business and continued to shout at Mom. At first, Mom just sat there silently, but then she quietly said, "Is it any wonder I act how I do? I mean, you have been having an affair with my friend." "Right. If you keep on being this ridiculous, then let's divorce." Then he stormed off. It was horrible. Now Mom was inconsolable, and I felt awful for telling her. That night, I messaged Lydia to meet up, but she called me instead. She told me that she'd called my dad to ask him for the plumber's phone number, but he said that he'd come and fix it. She also said that Josie and him really were over. Then she hung up. This was kinda odd, but I suppose Lydia was finding it tricky being stuck in the middle of things with her mom and me. I guess I just needed to give her some space until things cooled down. After that, Mom and Dad barely said a word to each other. Talk about tense. Then, one day, Mom decided to move to my grandparents for a few weeks, as she needed time to think everything through. I didn't blame her, but I didn't want to stay home alone with Dad, so I went and stayed with a college friend. One night, I came home to pick up some clean clothes when I saw it for myself. My dad was kissing her on the couch. I couldn't believe my eyes. He was such a liar. So I coughed to clear my voice, then said, "Oh, so it's over, is it?" They both looked up at me, and that's when my eyes met with hers. Only it wasn't Josie. Nope, it was Lydia. She stammered out, "Cora, why are you here?" What? Lydia? So my dad had been having an affair with Lydia? How could the girl who was always there for me through high school breakups, bad grade mishaps, and growing pains do this to me? Then Dad put his arm around her and told me everything. that he had never had any affair with Josie. It was Lydia all along, and that they were in love and wanted to get married. It was all too much for me, so I rushed out of there. Lydia ran after me and called out my name. Then when she caught up with me, she grabbed my arm. "Cora, wait, I want to explain. Your dad and I interrupted her. "Why lie? Why say it was your mom?" "I'm sorry. I just wasn't ready for everyone to find out then. So I sprayed my perfume on my mom and made up the story that she'd admitted to having an affair with him. As for the dishwasher thing, well, I set that up, as I knew you'd follow your dad and call your mom. I feel bad, but your mom needs to know. He doesn't love her. He loves me." I jerked my hand away and shouted, "You're such a liar! You don't deserve to be my friend, and you can't have him! He's with my mom!" Suddenly, she changed her attitude, smirked at me, and said, "Cora, let's accept the truth. Your dad is bored of your mom. Actually, I'll be your stepmother soon, my little daughter." Then she left. I had jello legs, and I was so overwhelmed that it made me feel dizzy, so I sat on the curb and tried to calm myself down. Then I called Mom and told her everything. She cried a lot, but she thanked me for telling her the truth. After that, Mom came home and told Dad she wanted a divorce. Then she demanded that he move out. This was 6 months ago, and it's been hard, but Mom and I are getting there. I haven't spoke to Dad or Lydia since, although I've heard that they're living together. I know I can't avoid them forever, but I just don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive them. For now, I'm staying strong for Mom and helping her through this. Then maybe one day in the future, if they contact me, I'll be ready to meet them, and maybe, eventually, find it in myself to let them back into my life.
I was swaying to the music with the hottest girl at school in my arms. Everything was perfect when suddenly I saw a flurry of red storming toward me, and then the next thing I knew, I was being slapped across the face. Ugh, it was my ex, Rosie. She was looking at me as if she wanted to snap me in half. Okay, so Rosie and me had only broken up yesterday, but that didn't mean she had the right to go full psycho on me. Hey, so I'm Andrew, and I like to think I'm a pretty smart guy. The problem is, I'm a sucker for hot girls. I tend to be blinded by their beauty. The result being, I don't always make the best decisions around them. But I had no idea what drama my weakness for a pretty girl was about to get me into. So it all began with the end-of-term college party. Me and my friends went heavy on the drinks. So when my friend Brad bet me a burger that I wouldn't go and ask Lisa to dance, well, I didn't hesitate in approaching her. Geez, she's so hot and way out of my league. So I was expecting her to tell me to go away, but instead she smiled and let me lead her over to the dance floor. While we were dancing, she whispered in my ear that she'd always liked me. Then, yep, you guessed it, Rosie, my crazy ex, stormed over and slapped me. I woke up the next morning with a pounding headache. Ugh, what was all that shouting coming from outside my open window? I wrapped my bed cover around me and shuffled my way over there to take a look. Lisa and Rosie were yelling at each other. "He's mine, not yours. Stay away." "He wants me, not you. Deal with it." "Oh yeah? Well, maybe we should ask Andrew who he prefers." "What's the point? As we both know he'll pick me." I was far too hungover for this, so I closed the window and went back to bed. These girls, they wouldn't stop. For the next few days, they bombarded me with messages and waited for me outside my house. Okay, so most guys dream of two hot girls fighting over them, but trust me, watching them pull each other's hair extensions out isn't as glamorous as it sounds. Thankfully, my prayers were answered by none other than Richie, my awesome brother. He showed up with a ticket for a luxury 2-week cruise trip. He'd booked it ages ago, but then a work thing came up, so the ticket was all mine. Hell yeah! I hugged my brother, grabbed the ticket out of his hand, and started packing. The tricky part was sneaking past Rosie and Lisa, who were still lingering about outside. So I borrowed my housemate's hoodie and baseball cap and pretended to be him to get past them. Result, they didn't even double look at me. Goodbye to my Lisa and Rosie nightmare and hello to the vacation of my dreams. Ah, this is the life. Trust my brother to book such a lavish place. My room was huge, and it had my very own balcony. There was so much to do here, from the outdoor bar, dozens of restaurants, swimming pool, cinema. I was on my own floating complex. Heaven. The next morning when I woke up in my king-size bed, I took in the sounds of silence. Yup, oh sweet silence, how I've missed you. This was a no-girl arguing zone. I got changed and walked over to the outdoor bar. It definitely wasn't too early for a cocktail. I had a pair of shades on, and that's when I spotted her. Whoa, she was beautiful. I quickly ordered 2 cocktails and began walking toward her. I was about to hand her the drink when I tripped over a sun lounger, and in slow motion I watched the cup fall. I desperately tried to grab it, but nope. Instead, I managed to knock into her back. She let out a yelp and then yelled out, "You pervert! What do you think you're playing at?" I stood there open-mouthed, contemplating if I should dive into the pool to escape this drama or not. Then I looked down at my sunglasses, which in all the action had fallen off. Suddenly, an idea came to me. So I bent down, stretched out my arms, and pretended to fumble around for them. She looked at me for a while, then picked my sunglasses up, placed them in my hand, then said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize. Here, let me help you." Then she took my arm and guided me across the pool area. I thanked her. And then, with my trusty shades on, I watched her walk away. So she thought I was blind. Yup, this wasn't my greatest idea, but it got me out of a sticky situation with a hot girl at least. Later that night, I went to the buffet restaurant for dinner. I was stacking my plate when I bumped straight into someone and almost dropped my plate. Ugh, it was that hot girl again. I quickly put my shades on, then deliberately turned the wrong way and loudly said, "Oh, I'm sorry." She put her hand on my shoulder and guided me so I was facing her, then said, "Yeah, it's me, the girl from the pool. And it's okay, I should have been looking where I was going. Do you need any help?" I quickly cut her off. "No thanks, it's okay." Then I lifted my plate up to my nose and sniffed it. These prawns sure smell good. She raised an eyebrow at my food-smelling talent, so I carried on pretending to sniff the food as I put it on my plate. And you know what? She wouldn't quit staring at me. Eventually, she walked off. Phew, what a narrow escape. Afterward, I went to the top deck bar to chill out, with yet another cocktail. Then who should walk over but, yup, you guessed it, the hot girl. I immediately looked away from her, but what's this? She walked over to me and sat down opposite me. "Hey, do you remember me?" she asked. Seeing my chance to flirt with her, I replied, "Oh yes, how could I forget someone as beautiful as you are?" "Huh? How do you know that I'm beautiful?" Damn it, I needed to think before I spoke. "Ah, well, it's your voice. A sweet voice like yours can only belong to a beautiful girl." Crisis averted. As after that we started chatting, and oh boy, she's a sweetheart. Do you know that she's an activist for an organization that works hard to guarantee the rights of baby girls born in Africa? I know, amazing. The evening came to an end and she said, "Oh, my name's Bella, by the way." I replied, "Bella, a name as beautiful as your soul. Mine's Andrew." She gave me a nervous giggle. "Well, Andrew, it's getting late, so I suppose I better get back to my cabin." I didn't want the night to ever end, so I blurted out, "Whoa, Bella, look at the sky. Isn't it so stunning?" She glared at me and then replied, "How would you know that?" Oops, of course, I was meant to be blind. I can feel it from the breeze." She gave me a quizzing look, then said, "Right, well, good night. How about we meet at the arcade tomorrow, let's say 10 a.m.? I excitedly agreed, then she left. Another close escape. I really needed to be more careful. Bella, Bella, Bella. I couldn't stop thinking of her. The next day, I'm such a kid when it comes to arcades, I can't help it. My inner child comes out and, ooh, a car racing game. Nope, I was pretending to be blind. So I awkwardly lingered in the foyer and waited for Bella to show up. When she did, she took my arm and guided me through the arcade. She described all the different games machines to me, which I thought was really sweet. Then she led me over to the plushie grabber machine and squealed excitedly. Hoo-hoo, I loved these as a kid. Soon I was fumbling about to slot my money in, adamant I was going to win her a plushie. But wait, I was meant to be blind. So I touched the controls, then closed my eyes. Her laughter said it all. Massive fail. It was all going to be okay until Bella had to use the restroom and instructed me to stay put and wait for her by a shooting game machine, which just so happened to be my all-time favorite arcade game. I rushed over to it as soon as she was out of sight, grabbed a gun, and shot 5 cannons in a row. Then I jumped up and down and whooped in the air. I turned around and saw Bella frowning at me. Oh boy, busted. I tried to explain, but she just shook her head and said, "How could you? You're a coward, a pervert, and a liar." Then she ran off. I felt terrible. I tried searching the ship for her, but I couldn't find her anywhere. Feeling bummed out, I ordered a cocktail, then went for a walk across the deck. Suddenly, I heard shouting coming from below me. Huh? What was that? I peered down and saw a man and a woman trying to drag a little girl into one of the safety rafts. Hang on, they weren't alone. Bella was there too. She was trying to pull the little girl away from them. Without even thinking, I dropped my drink and ran over to them. I charged towards the woman and knocked her so hard she almost fell into the sea. The man reached out to steady her, which gave Bella a chance to pick up the kid. Then she grabbed my arm and pulled me away. After that, the bad guys jumped into the raft and sailed away. We returned the girl to her parents. It turns out Bella was on her way to her cabin when she saw a couple in tears as they couldn't find their daughter. So she went looking for her and walked in on the kidnapping. After that, Bella forgave me. Well, I did save the day and all. And we spent the rest of the trip together. Then on our last day, I got down on one knee and asked her to be my girlfriend. And she said yes. I took her back home with me, and as we walked over to my house, Lisa and Rosie ran towards me and started arguing with each other about who I liked more. Oh shoot, I'd forgotten about them. Reading the situation, Bella approached them. Thank God you're here. I assume one of you is his girlfriend, right? There was an accident, and Andrew's blind now, and he really needs someone by his side 24/7. Hearing that, I quickly coordinated with her by waving my arms wildly about. So, which one is your girlfriend, Andy? It's Lisa. Rosie quickly chimed in. No, he's all yours. We only hung out once. Ha, what suckers. I watched them run away. Then Bella and I burst out laughing. After that, I held my arm out to her and let her guide me home, for old time's sake. Lying to her about being blind was a jerky thing to do, but I only did it in the first place because being around beautiful girls makes me so nervous I do dumb stuff. It's just lucky that Bella forgave me, because I think this dumbass may have found his dream girl.
Hi, that's me, Maxine, hiding behind some bushes and spying on a girl. Don't get me wrong, I don't have a crush on her, nor am I a total psychopath. I'm just doing a favor for my mate Damon. But if I'd known how crazy this was all going to get, I'd never have agreed to help him. It all started when Damon fell in love with this girl, Sophie. She had this mysterious charm that made him want to talk to her right away. And he did. She didn't even glance at him. She just walked away. Ouch. I didn't like her one bit. She was so stuck up. But Damon didn't give up that easily. He tried all kinds of tricks to get her attention, even waiting for the bus with her, even though he had a car. Nothing worked, though, and this made him miserable. He begged for my help, but I said, no way. Then he said, "Aw, come on, Maxine, you're a girl, so just befriend her or something. Maybe you can find out what she likes, her fave foods, music, etc. Then I can try to impress her. Please, I'm begging you. I'll even lend you my Nintendo Switch for a month if you agree. You can't say no to that." He had me at that. I'd do anything to get a Nintendo Switch. Fine, it's a deal, but don't blame me if it doesn't work. So after class that day, I searched for Sophie. She was at the bus stop, and I was about to approach her when suddenly she walked away. I decided to follow her, and on the way, she stopped to help an old lady cross the road. Wow, I was surprised. For someone with such a cold face, she had a pretty warm heart. Maybe she wasn't so bad after all. After that, she started walking towards the park, and by then it was starting to get dark. What was she doing? She sat down on a bench in a creepy part of the park, almost like she was waiting for someone. I hid behind a bush so she wouldn't see me, but I was totally freaked out. Suddenly, 2 guys appeared and started talking to her, but they didn't seem like her acquaintances. Oh my gosh, she looked panicked. I had to help. I quickly shouted, "Help! Officer, please help! There are 2 guys bothering us!" Obviously, there was no officer, but it worked. The 2 guys ran off, and I rushed over to make sure Sophie was okay. She was surprised to see me, but then she hugged me and thanked me for saving her. Her whole body was shaking. She must have been terrified. I walked with her back to our dorm, and she told me how she liked to come to the park at night because it was so peaceful. I told her it was clearly dangerous and that she probably shouldn't go alone anymore. Then we exchanged numbers, and after that we became quite close. Close enough, That was a few days later. I told her Damon had a big crush on her and asked if she'd maybe go on a date with him. But she just shook her head and said she wasn't ready. Her eyes looked sad, so I didn't push it any further. Maybe she'd just gone through a bad breakup? I didn't ask her again, but one night I was heading to her dorm for a movie night when I heard two people fighting. It was Sophie and some guy, and she was crying. It looked like the guy was about to hit her, so I ran over and said, "Hey, what the heck do you think you're doing? Leave her alone or I'll call the cops." He just laughed at me and said to Sophie, "We're not done yet." Then he stormed off. I asked Sophie if she was okay and who that guy was. Then she told me how he was her ex and that he kept trying to get back together with her, but she wasn't interested. As she told me this, she started to cry and said, "Because of him, I've become so scared and anxious. I'm even too scared to sleep at night." I felt so sorry for her and told her I was here for her and that she could call me anytime. Well, maybe I shouldn't have said that because that's exactly what she started doing. Every night she'd call me and we'd end up chatting until 3 a.m. I was so exhausted, but I wanted to help her. She seemed so anxious all the time. Damon knew we chatted a lot, but he'd stopped asking about Sophie. It seems he'd lost interest and was more worried about me looking like a zombie from The Walking Dead. "You seriously need some sleep, Maxine. Leave Sophie be. She's clearly got issues. It's probably best to not get too involved." Easier said than done, though. But that night I decided not to answer her call. I went to bed early, and when I woke up the next morning, I had about 20 missed calls and 50 texts from her. Oh my gosh! Some of them said she was so lonely and that I'd abandoned her. Then one said, "If you don't pick up, then I will end it all." Okay, this was crazy. I immediately called her, but she wouldn't pick up. I rushed to her dorm, but nobody answered. I was panicking by then and bashing on the door, screaming, "Sophie, open this darn door!" But there was still no answer. I was terrified she'd done something bad, so I asked some students to help me bash down the door, and that's when she opened the door. I've never been so happy to see someone alive. I ran over to hug her, but she looked so annoyed. "What are you doing here? You're making a scene," she said. "What? I was so worried about you. You said you were going to..." But she interrupted me and said, "You need to get some sleep, Maxine. You seem insane." I couldn't believe it. After all those calls and texts, she was the insane one, not me. I didn't feel like yelling back, so I just left her. I needed some space. She tried to apologize to me over the next few days, but I didn't want to be around her. She even texted me saying if I wouldn't be her friend anymore, then life wasn't worth living. I was so tired of her threats, so I just ignored them. And then things got worse. A few days later, Damon and I were studying together when Sophie called me and said she was in the hospital. She told me that she had a brain tumor and they'd just done a biopsy to see if it was malignant or benign. I couldn't believe it. She asked me if I could pick her up, and I said, of course. This was so scary. I told Damon, and he just said, "I think she's making it up, Maxine. How could she suddenly have a tumor? You guys just had a fight, and suddenly she's in the hospital? Come on, think about it." I was shocked. "Damon, how could you? You're such a jerk." Then I ran off and arrived at the hospital to find Sophie sitting outside wearing a hospital cap. She said her hair had been shaved off for the biopsy, and I asked to see the scar, but she wouldn't show me. She said she'd get a headache if she took it off. I was just glad that she was okay and gave her a ride home. We made up, and I decided to look after her for the day. She seemed so weak. I couldn't bear to see her suffering. I called Damon to tell him that he owed me an apology and told him about Sophie. And he just said, "Oh, wow, okay, sorry, hope she's okay then." But then a few days later, he called me and said, "Listen, Maxine, Sophie's a liar. She didn't have a biopsy. I bumped into her earlier and her cap fell off, and she has a full head of hair under there. No way it would grow back that fast." Why would she lie to me? I didn't get it. I needed to know the truth, so after class I went to her dorm. She opened the door right away, and sure enough, she had all her hair intact. She probably knew Damon had told me, and so hadn't even bothered to keep up the lie. This made me furious. Straight away, I started shouting at her. Honestly, Sophie, what is wrong with you? Why would you pretend to be sick like that? Friends don't do that. Sophie grabbed my hand and said, Maxine, I'm sorry. I was desperate. I only did it because I missed you and wanted you to care about me again. I took it too far, though. Please forgive me. Are you crazy? I screamed. I was worried sick about you. Are you sure there's not something wrong with you? Sophie started grinning in a weird way and said, The only thing wrong with me is that I'm in love with you, Maxine. She wouldn't let go of my hand, and I just stared in shock. What did you say? You heard me. I love you. Then she started to manically laugh and said, I've loved you since the day we first met. I knew you were following me, so I pretended to be in danger so you'd come rescue me. Even my ex-boyfriend was fake. He was just one of my friends pretending. Can't you see? I'm willing to do just about anything to get your attention. If that's not love, then what is? This couldn't be happening. I tried to stay as calm as possible and said, Listen, Sophie, I'm flattered. Really, I am. But I'm straight. I see you as just a friend, okay? But Sophie wouldn't give up. She grabbed my hands again and said, How do you know that? You didn't even try to love me yet. Just give me a chance and I'll show you what true love looks like. I tried to let go of her hands, but it was impossible. Sophie grabbed my hands tighter and tighter that it even began to hurt. She looked me in the eyes and, oh my God, it's like I couldn't recognize her anymore. She looked like a crazy person, like a psychopath. Then she began to speak in a really creepy tone. You can't get away from me. You're mine now. I was so scared. I needed to get out of here, so I pushed her really hard that she fell on the ground and I ran like a mad woman out of there until I was back in my dorm. Then I called the police, but by the time they reached her dorm, she was gone. I told them what happened and showed them a photo of her, and you won't believe it. Apparently, I wasn't the only girl Sophie had attacked. There were other girls, too. After that night, I was terrified. Everywhere I went, it felt like someone was watching me. Then one evening, after my shift at work, I was walking through the park back to my dorm when I heard someone up ahead. I knew right away it was Sophie, but she wasn't alone. She was with some guys. They spotted me and started heading towards me. But I ran as fast as I could, and luckily the police were just outside the park and went in and arrested them. Sounds like a coincidence, right? Well, it wasn't. Sophie's not the only one who can fool people. I knew Sophie was stalking me, so I told the police, and together we created this plan to catch her, and voila, it worked. Sophie, if you're watching this, I wish you all the best, but let's not meet ever again. That's enough stalking for one lifetime.
I walked into the cafeteria and gulped. The only free seat was next to Joanna, one of the weirdest girls in school. She was always sitting alone, and usually I'd avoid her because people said she didn't speak much and was totally shy. But somehow, I felt kinda sorry for her. I mean, how bad could it be? Well, famous last words. It was bad. I sat down with a smile, but she just glared at me and grunted, Go on then. Throw me your worst insult. I was confused and said, Oh, no, I just wanted to sit here and say hi. Are you okay? Suddenly, Joanna started speaking at 1,000,000 miles per hour, telling me that of course she wasn't okay and that she had to see a therapist every day. Then she showed me all the pills she had to take and said she had crippling anxiety. I was shocked. Overwhelmed with TMI, I felt uncomfortable and thought of leaving, but then she grabbed my hand and said, We're friends now, right? I've never had a friend in my life before. You're the first person I've really been able to open up to. Not even my parents know how hard it is for me. Whoa, I couldn't leave her now. I patted on her shoulder and told her I'd happily be her friend. I mean, it would just be spending some lunch together or grabbing a coffee at most. It'd be fine. However, Joanna's interpretation of a friend was slightly different from mine. 3 days later, I got back from the library quite late, so I went straight to my room as usual and started changing, only to find Joanna right behind me as I turned around. I almost woke up the whole building with a scream of fright. "Oh, hey, roomie," she said with a big grin. What? This was insane. Roomie? What do you mean? But she just laughed and said she'd felt very lonely in her dorm on her own, and seeing as I had a double room, she'd asked the dorm supervisor if she could move in with me. I guess it wasn't so bad. I mean, I got lonely too sometimes. So that night, we stayed up super late chatting. And to be honest, it was actually nice to have a roomie. We became quite close, and a few nights later, we were having a movie night. Joanna turned to me and said, "Carrie, there's something I need to tell you." Oh no, surely there wasn't any more disturbing things left. How did this girl cope? But then she started blushing and said, "I have a crush on someone. His name is Mitch." Oh gosh, I knew exactly who she was talking about. "Joanna, he's bad news. He's a total womanizer. You're way too good for him." At least, that's what I said, but what I meant was that he was only into popular girls. He'd never go for a girl like Joanna. Joanna didn't take it well. "You're jealous, aren't you? I bet you have a crush on him too." "Well, I confessed, so he's mine." "Huh, you're welcome to him. I never fancy someone like Mitch. I'm not that kind of girl." Joanna then said she'd prove to me that she could win him over. I felt annoyed at her and just went back to watching the movie. For a second there, it felt like my life had way more drama than ever before, and I started regretting ever sitting at her table that day. Little did I know, it was just the beginning. A week later, I was hit in the face by a huge surprise. Joanna and Mitch started dating. I was lying there listening to music when I heard voices outside the door. I opened it, and there was Mitch walking off. He turned back to blow Joanna a kiss, and then you should have seen the smug expression on her face. "Told ya," she said, laughing. Wow, cocky. But okay, I was happy for her. She was a woman of her word. But I was worried she'd get hurt. I didn't have time to tell her this, though, because pretty soon she was with him 24/7. He even came over to our dorm, and I was sick of listening to them kissing. They were disgustingly lovey-dovey all the time, and it quickly became exhausting. On Valentine's Day, he sent 100 balloons to our dorm, and I couldn't even get through the door. Could he be any more over the top? It wasn't even that romantic. But Joanna was smitten. It was painful to watch. But not as painful as seeing Mitch walking along the street holding some other girl's hand. I froze. This couldn't be. I quickly texted Joanna asking her how things were going between her and Mitch. She replied immediately saying, "All good, why?" So I told her what I'd seen, but I got no reply. I rushed back to her dorm and asked her why she was ignoring me and if she was okay. But she just started shouting at me, saying I was trying to ruin her relationship because I was jealous. Clearly, she didn't believe me. I told her I was telling the truth, but she just got up and left, slamming the door behind her. Things got really awkward after that. She ignored me in the dorm, ignored me in class, and wouldn't reply to any of my texts. And she still brought Mitch back to our room and kissed him in front of me. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore and asked her to move out. But I didn't expect what would happen next. Joanna lost it. She started shouting, "What's your problem? For the first time in my life, I'm happy and someone loves me. And there you are, trying to ruin this for me. And now you want to kick me out? It's not my fault you're single, Carrie. Maybe if you stopped being so jealous for a second, someone would like you back." I couldn't believe her. I wanted to scream. She was the worst. And the next morning, it got even worse. I was sitting with some friends before class started when suddenly Joanna walked in and burst into tears. People ran over to her and asked if she was okay, and that's when my blood ran cold. She started saying how I'd been bad-mouthing her boyfriend, and now I wanted to kick her out of our dorm. And then I heard my voice. I looked over, and she had her phone out and was playing a recording of our argument. Of course, she'd edited it to make me sound like the bad guy. Even my friends looked shocked, and Joanna told them all how I was a two-faced, good-for-nothing kind of girl and that I loved to gossip about everyone behind their backs. I tried to explain to everyone that Joanna was lying and that she was just angry, but everyone looked at me in shock. It was like they believed her. I was stunned. The next day, I noticed Joanna showing my friends some photos on her phone. They were screenshots of texts from me, but she'd edited them to create a total monster out of me. One time, Joanna had messaged me laughing about how my friend Valerie had the worst hairstyle ever, and I joked that she must have cut it by herself. And there was the message where Joanna talked about how Mitch said his ex, Anna, who was also our class president, must have been flirting with the economics teacher to get good grades. And I said, has Anna sunk that low? Not only having an affair with a married man, but basically committing academic fraud? I don't think she would do that, though. But of course, Joanna had cropped out the last sentence, and she didn't show her parts in the conversation either. By that way, I looked like the worst friend ever. I tried to tell them what Joanna was doing, but they were too hurt to believe me. But that's not all. You see, Joanna had sent these messages to the whole school. For the rest of the day, people were coming up to me and telling me I was nothing but a mean girl. And then at lunch, I went to sit in my usual spot with my friends, and suddenly they all jumped up and left me there alone. I could hear everyone whispering about me. And then the most popular girl, Amy, came over to me and said I was a disappointment to this college, and I didn't even deserve to be here. I couldn't hold back my tears, so I rushed back to my dorm. But standing there with her arms folded, blocking the door, was the dorm supervisor. She said that she'd received reports about my behavior and that I had 1 week to move out of the dorm. I didn't understand. What had I done? Apparently, people had told her I wanted to get her fired. And then I remembered Joanna saying those exact words and asked me how she could report to the manager. So I'd sent her a text explaining how to report her. Oh my gosh, she'd even used that against me? This was too much. I went to find Joanna. I was furious. She was ruining my life. When I got to class, I planned to show everyone our full chat conversations, unedited. But I didn't get the chance because Joanna was sobbing hysterically, and everyone was comforting her. She was saying how living with me was torture, and that she had to take medication to deal with me. Enough! How dare you! I screamed. Why are you doing this to me? What did I ever do to you? Joanna, of course, started crying even louder, and everyone stared at me like they wanted to kill me. I walked out of there feeling completely empty. I'd lost my friends, my dorm, my reputation, and every last bit of dignity, all because of that snake. I still didn't know what I'd done wrong. The more I tried to understand it, the more everyone defended Joanna. It was useless. No one listened to me. Eventually, I ignored them all, moved out of the dorm, and acted like Joanna didn't exist. Fortunately, I made some new friends that loved and trusted me and never twisted my words. As for gossiping about me that everyone else still did, I learned to block it out. And then about 4 months later, I got an email from Joanna. I was shocked. She said, "Carrie, I'm sorry. You were right all along. Mitch was cheating on me, and I should have listened to you. Please forgive me. I'm begging you. I'll do anything to make it up to you. I'll confess to everyone. Please, let's just be friends again. I miss you." Ha! Not in a million years. I deleted the email right away. There was nothing that she could do to ever make it up to me. She'd ruined my life, and I was done with that toxicity. Good riddance. I blinked open my eyes. Whoa, my head felt dizzy. And, why was I covered in scratches? My mind was totally blank. I couldn't remember what happened. The last picture flashing through my mind was a heated argument between me and some guy. Then I stormed off and now, here I am, in this gloomy place. I think it's a basement or something. It's cold, and it stinks of damp. Dang it! I cannot remember his face. I knew I needed to get out of here, and fast. I ran to the door and tried opening it, but to no avail. It's locked. I slammed my hands against the door and shouted, "Anyone? Help!" I could hear footsteps approaching, so ignoring my throbbing palms and burning throat, I banged on the door and screamed out, "Open the door!" Oh my God! It's him! The guy I'd been arguing with before! He was holding a sandwich and smiling gently at me. "Oh, Alice, my puppy. Are you awake? I thought you might be hungry." "Who are you? You brought me here, didn't you? What do you want?" He looked confused, then sadly blurted out, "Oh no, honey. You must have memory loss from the accident. It's your Josh here. I'm your boyfriend." I squinted at him. He did look familiar, but what boyfriend? What accident? He showed me the photos on his phone. OMG! That was me with him, and we looked so happy together. But why can't I remember anything? I hit my head with my hands in frustration, while Josh just stood there against the wall staring at me and giggling. So maybe this Josh guy was my boyfriend, but that didn't explain why he'd locked me up in this dungeon. This wasn't a normal boyfriend thing to do. I rushed to the door, but he grabbed me in his arms. "Let me out! You definitely have some wicked intention going on bringing me here." I scowled. "Oh my gosh, Alice, you've been watching too many movies. Do you really not remember anything?" I gave him a clearly not look, then folded my arms. "I guess the accident was pretty intense. We argued, then you insisted on driving while you were drunk, and then caused a fatal accident. Never mind. I think we shouldn't go in too deep about that right now. It must be traumatizing for you. But that's why I decided to bring you here, so the cops wouldn't arrest you." What? Why couldn't I remember such a horrible thing? But looking at all the wounds on my face and body, maybe everything was exactly like what Josh said. No! I have to confess. I stuttered in tears. "Are you crazy? Do you want to go to jail?" But, Alice, no buts. I'm gonna protect you and keep you safe." This was a lot to process, so in a moment of panic, I found myself agreeing to his crazy plan. Josh said this was an emergency bunker back from his grandfather's time. Sure thing. I mean, it sure smelled musty. There's not even a window, just a flickering wall light. It felt like I was in a horror movie. Josh also told me that he'd taken my phone off me, so the cops wouldn't be able to trace it and arrest us both. And that's it. Every morning, noon, and night, Josh would bring me food and talk to me about his day. "Puppy, I'm home." Puppy? Oh, it sounded cute at first, but I soon became allergic to that word. "Hey, puppy, eat this. Puppy this, puppy that. Puppy, puppy, puppy." I was so fed up with the word puppy that at times I actually thought I was nothing more than a pet to him. Then each night, he insisted on rubbing my back so I'd fall asleep more easily. Sounds nice, right? But no, it wasn't. He rubbed it really hard, and when I asked him to stop, he just laughed. Obviously, he wasn't doing it to make me feel better, but regarded it as a pastime. Ugh! And that's not all. A few times, I'd wake up to see him sitting there, staring at me with this gummy grin on his face. Then, when I checked my hair, I saw that he'd tied loads of these dumb little bows in it. Are you crazy? I'm not a kid! I grumbled while pulling and throwing all those dumb things out of my head. But puppy, they look so cute. Tom always liked them. I glared at him. Didn't bother saying anything anymore. Oh, and FYI, yes, Tom's his old dog's name. Okay, so I didn't need a genius to figure out that something was seriously up with this guy's head. But then, things got weirder. One time, he brought down food for us to eat together. It was fried chicken, and as soon as I smelt it, my eyes sparkled. I was about to take a piece when suddenly he pulled the plate away and took a big bite. I didn't even have time to react. Then he handed me the chicken thigh bone he hadn't finished yet. Help me with the rest, puppy. This part is too hard to gnaw. I rolled my eyes at him and flushed up with anger. Seeing my reaction, he said, "What's wrong, puppy? Tom always loved the leftovers." Are you crazy? I screamed. Yo, I'm kidding. Don't you know how to take a joke? He grinned. Kidding? What kind of kidding is that? I've had enough of this. This place was driving me insane. I could hardly sleep at all because I couldn't even distinguish between day and night. Then, when I did close my eyes, I found myself tormented by the serious crime I'd committed. Josh was trying to save me. Yes, but I didn't ask him to do that. I couldn't live like this. I needed to face the truth. I had to turn myself in. The next morning, when Josh brought me breakfast, I told him what I wanted to do. Expectedly, he got mad and glared at me. Alice, why do you want to go to jail so badly? I can't stay here forever. I have to face up to what I've done. But it's so peaceful here with me. Peaceful? Was he being serious? It sure didn't feel peaceful. Instead, I felt like I was playing the role of his pet. I lurched forward, but Josh immediately grabbed me so I couldn't move. I tried squirming my way free, but he was a strong guy. Suddenly, he covered my nose with a handkerchief and my eyes closed. Then everything turned black. I slowly opened my eyes. I was in the same familiar room, but bars. I saw bars! Ugh! I was in a cage! Then I kicked something. It was a water bowl! Puppy, you're so naughty! I can't lose you, so I've put you in here! He grinned at me as he handed me a sandwich. I chucked it away, then screamed at him to let me out. Seeing this, he immediately left and returned with a bunch of plush toys and dropped them in the cage. Hope they'll make you happier. Then he tried to stuff the sandwich into my mouth. Furiously, I took a bite and spat it in his face, then sneered while throwing the toys at him. Jeez, some of them even squeaked. Wow. Okay. His demeanor changed, and his eyes turned scary. If that's what you want, don't blame me later. Things were different after that. Each day, he only gave me a bowl of those gross-smelling biscuits, then he'd just sit there gawping at me. At first, I refused to eat them. But in the end, I was so exhausted that I gave in, even though I'm pretty sure they were dog biscuits. Ugh! I realized that resisting him wasn't benefiting me at all. It was only making him act more horrible. That's when a genius plan popped into my head. So the next time when Josh appeared with the biscuits, I smiled sweetly at him and said, Josh, baby, it's been so long since we've been on a date. How about you go and get us a bottle of wine, and we can spend some quality time together? His eyes lit up, and of course, he agreed without hesitation. He hurried off to get the wine. Cheers to us! Josh, you're the love of my life. and I'm so grateful to God for bringing you into my life. Please stay with me forever." I flashed a sweet smile and whispered in his ear. Every time he took a sip of wine, I fluttered my eyelashes at him as I refilled his glass. To say I'm a Hollywood actress with an Oscar-worthy performance would be an understatement. Soon, Josh was so drunk he went cross-eyed. He fell to the ground before I even finished pouring him the last glass of wine. Seizing the opportunity, I stepped over him to get out, when suddenly, a hand grabbed my ankle. Oh no, I'm screwed! My heart felt like it was about to jump out of my chest. I immediately turned around, ready to fight him when, well, it turned out he was just dreaming. Phew. Thank God. I gently pulled my foot free and immediately dashed out of there. I climbed up the stairs to a living room where I found my phone left on the table. I quickly grabbed it and ran out of that horrible house. My legs trembled, and I felt like they might give away beneath me at any second. But somehow, I managed to find the inner strength to keep on running. I couldn't use my phone as it was out of battery, and I was too disoriented to figure out where my home was. So, when I stumbled upon a police station, I walked toward it. I took a deep breath. This was a tough decision. I knew I was going to jail, but I couldn't live in creepy Josh's basement forever and be his substitute pet. No thanks. I had to face up to what I'd done. "Sir, I'm here to confess." The cop looked confused and told me there hadn't been a fatal accident recently. But then he said I looked familiar, so he looked up my name, and turns out my family had reported me missing. That liar Josh had tricked me. It was all a ruse so he could imprison me. How vile! I charged my phone, and up popped hundreds of messages and voicemails from my worried friends and relatives. This was all so overwhelming. I put my head down for a moment. Then all the memories gradually surfaced. I'd been in the mall parking lot, and I felt like someone was following me. So I hid in the corner, and that's when Josh appeared. So I asked him, "Why are you following me?" "Alice, I love you. Please come back to me." I rolled my eyes and started walking away from him. "Go away, weirdo! We're done!" Then he grabbed my shoulder. I shook myself free and ran away, when a car came out of nowhere and... Ugh! Yes, of course. Josh was my crazy, controlling stalker ex. So he must have taken advantage of my unconsciousness to take me back to his basement and come up with his bonkers plan. Then to make things even easier for him, I ended up with memory loss. Typical! It was a nightmare. But thankfully, it's over now. The cops took my statement, and soon after that, my family came to pick me up. They all burst out crying, and we hugged each other tightly. It's taking a while to get back to normal life after all the trauma, but I'm getting there. I do want to vomit whenever I hear anyone say the word puppy. Ugh. However, this didn't stop me from getting my own rescue dog, Lily the Corgi, and I never put bows in her fur. As for Josh, well, he was convicted for false imprisonment and has to stay in jail for 4 years. Who's in the cage now? Serves you right.
It was a normal Monday morning. I was standing by my locker when this Layla girl walked over, leaned against the locker next to mine, and talked to me in this sultry voice. "Hi, handsome. Do you have any plans after school?" I looked around in confusion. Was she talking to me? Usually girls like Layla didn't talk to guys like me. I mean, come on, look at her. She's the hottest girl in school. While I'm Felix, just your average-looking nerdy guy. I awkwardly replied, "Oh, hi, I'm just doing my homework after school. Bye." Then I left her there, dumbfounded. But it didn't end there. At the end of school, she approached me again and asked, "Do you want to hang out with me?" Followed by a wink. No thanks, I really have to finish my paper on the French Revolution." Then I walked off. Man, did she really want to hang out with me? No way. She must have lost a bet or something. Even on the next day, Layla, one more time, made a beeline for me with this scary, determined look on her face while I was chatting with my friends. And in a serious tone, she said, "Look, Felix, do you want to be my boyfriend?" What? All my friends started to cheer. I was so embarrassed that I shooed them away to get some privacy with Layla. I'm flattered, but no." She scowled at me. "Excuse me? Do you realize that I'm Layla Hall, the prettiest and most popular girl in this entire school? Not to mention a member of the cheerleading team?" Ugh, cheerleaders are so dramatic. I calmly replied, "Sorry, but you're just not my type." She shouted back, "What? I'm everybody's type!" I just shrugged and left. My God, that was awkward. But at least she got the hint now, right? Well, wrong. Because that's when the trouble just began. Firstly, it was this flood of junk emails and newsletters. Then strange phone calls from the spa and nail salon, asking if I had made an appointment for the day, which I obviously didn't. On top of that, there's a fake Facebook account that started spreading unflattering pictures of me around, picking my nose in French class, pulling this weird tongue-out concentration face as I checked over my essay. There was even a slow-mo clip of me chewing like a camel as I enjoyed my burger. Man, I was an ugly eater. While I was scrolling through these pics, Layla jumped out at me with a big smirk on her face. "Be my boyfriend, then the pranks'll stop." Right, of course it was her. Didn't she have better things to do? I shook my head and said, "No thanks. This still beats being with an annoying girl like you." Then a few days later, as I walked into school, I noticed that everyone was giving me dirty looks. Was my shirt inside out or something? Nope. So what was the problem? I asked some of my friends and, geez, Layla told everyone that I kissed her, then ghosted her. She's a real-life Harley Quinn. Hot, but totally crazy. Only a lunatic like the Joker could love her. I'd had enough of her antics. I couldn't let her make me look like the bad guy for something I didn't do. So at lunch, I charged over to her table and yelled in her face, "Are you crazy? Why can't you understand that I don't like you?" Then I shouted so everyone could hear me, "Hey, listen, this rumor about me kissing and ghosting Layla is a total lie. She made it all up because I refused to date her. So please, save your dirty looks for someone else. Thank you." Layla shoved past me and ran out of there. Ugh, okay, maybe I was a little harsh. But you'd brought it on yourself, princess. Then during French class, she was absent, but no one knew where she went. Was it maybe because of me? Nah, probably not. But as I was walking home, I spotted her sitting alone on a swing in the playground. Just go, Felix. This girl only brings trouble, I thought to myself. But oh man, she looked so sad. So the next thing I knew, I was walking over and sat on the swing next to her. I asked, "Why weren't you in French class?" "Just leave me alone. Stop pretending you care." "Look." I took a deep breath, then continued. "I'm sorry for yelling at you in front of the whole school. That wasn't cool. But what you did to me wasn't cool either. Shall we call it even?" Layla stayed quiet for a bit, but then she nodded and smiled at me. Well, that wasn't so bad, right? So from then onward, everything was fine between us. She even smiled at me in the hallway. Whenever I saw Layla, this warm feeling came over me, and I couldn't stop grinning. Once, I even spent my entire lunch break trapezing around school just so I could catch a glimpse of her face. Oh boy, I think I've fallen for Layla. But why now? I tried to ignore these feelings, hoping they'd eventually go away. But then Valentine's Day came along, and Layla, being the popular girl she is, received enough roses to open a florist. Ugh, how annoying. I needed to do something. So after school, I went to her house with some chocolates and a teddy bear. As soon as she opened the door, I blurted out, "I know I'm a big dumb idiot. Rejecting you was a huge mistake. Please, will you be my Valentine?" I stood there red-faced and prepared for rejection. But she just snatched the gift out of my hands, then said, "Yeah, okay then." Oh my God, I couldn't believe it. Me, your regular nerdy guy, was dating the most popular girl in school. Love is really unpredictable. I was amazed at how open she was to my nerdy stuff. She even watched The Mandalorian with me and cooed whenever she saw Baby Yoda. But the one thing that didn't gel so well between us was, yep, you guessed it, studying. Layla didn't seem to care about her grades, and I didn't want her to fail, so I offered to be her tutor. But she was constantly yawning and staring out of the window whenever we started studying. "Felix, I have an idea. Why don't you do my homework for me? In the meantime, I can go to cheerleading practice as we have an important contest coming up, and it means the world to me, just like your math quizzes do to you." What? Was she serious? My God, I hated cheating like this. But she gave me that puppy-eyed look, and me being the sucker I am, I agreed. "Thanks, Felix. You're the best." She kissed me on the cheek, then immediately passed me a huge pile of homework. I asked her why she had so much, and she explained that because she didn't understand it, she let them pile up. But hold on, why did she have Spanish? She was in French class with me, not Spanish. But she just shrugged and said her parents forced her to study it outside of school. Oh, my poor little pumpkin. One day, like usual, I stopped by her place to pick up her homework, but she wasn't home. That was odd. Today wasn't cheerleading practice, so where could she be? I looked through the stack that she asked her mom to give me and saw some Spanish worksheets. So I said to her mom, "Oh, she must be in her Spanish lesson, right?" Her mom looked a bit confused, then laughed. "You know Layla, she's far too stubborn to agree to extra classes." Huh? So the papers weren't hers? Then whose it was? And why? Suddenly I felt this uncomfortable feeling itching under my skin. I decided to confront her later at school. Then the next day I was walking through the hallway looking for Layla when I suddenly heard some guys cheering, something about getting an A in Spanish. Wait a minute, did he say Spanish? I turned to see who it was, and to my shock it was Hector, the captain of the soccer team. Hector was popular for being all handsome and everything, but also for sucking at school. Someone must have done his homework for him, and you guessed it, yeah. This someone was me. It all made sense now. Layla and Hector must be a couple. They may have been hot stuff, but they both sucked at studying. So she was using me to do both of their homework. It all made much more sense now. None of this relationship was real. It was all just an act. And no way was I letting them get away with this. I had a perfect plan to expose them. During lunch, I sat down at the table closest to Hector. Then I went into lovey-dovey overload with Layla. I fed her cheese fries, then I stroked her hair and loudly told her how soft it was. I quickly glanced over at Hector for his reaction, but nothing. He seemed more interested in her burger than her. Layla raised an eyebrow at me. Are you okay? You're acting really weird." I laughed loudly, then placed my arms around her, then said, it was actually more like shouting, "Oh, because you're so cute!" But why was there still no reaction from Hector? He and his friends even cheered, and on his way out of the canteen, he gave me a thumbs up. Layla didn't look fazed at all either. Man, somebody call the academy, 'cause these two deserved an Oscar. My plan was a massive fail. This was so frustrating. I fell silent, and Layla noticed and gave me this quizzing look. "Something is definitely off. You're being really strange." Okay, if she wanted to know, then fine. So I blurted out, "I know that the Spanish papers belong to Hector. You're together and you're just using me to do all your homework. I'm not stupid, you know. Nice meeting you, but please don't ever talk to me again." Then I left without saying a word. Well, that's the end of my story. A rather sad one, right? I would be lying if I said I wasn't feeling down about it. I truly do love her. Whatever. I'm going to college in a few months and I'll get to meet a cute, geeky girl who won't trick me into doing some other dude's homework. Sorry guys, someone's calling me. My God, it's Layla. What does she want? "We're done. Stop calling." What? Fine. Promise you'll leave me alone after this? Okay, wait, I'm coming downstairs. Oh my God. Layla's at my front door and she insists to not leave unless I have a talk with her. Ugh. Don't move, everyone. I'll tell you every detail as soon as I'm back. Jesus, guys, you won't believe what Layla's just told me. The thing is that her cheerleading team had to practice a lot for upcoming contests, which means they couldn't study as much. Therefore, they had to find someone who was willing to do their homework so their grades wouldn't slip. That's when Layla came up with the plan to win me over as her boyfriend. The flirting, the pranks, they were all part of her plan. That was the truth. But Layla didn't know about the Spanish worksheets because her teammate Harper gave them to her. Turns out Hector is Harper's boyfriend. Didn't see that coming, right? But I was still super mad at Layla because she still used me. Then Layla took out some papers and showed them to me. It was homework with all B's on them. Then she told me, "Okay, I admit that at first I didn't like you. I only approached you to take advantage of you. But then I actually fell for you as I got to know you better, okay? So I stopped giving you my homework and did it on my own." So, her feelings for me were real too? I couldn't believe it. Eventually I forgave her and now we're happier than ever. I must say, when Layla first talked to me, I thought she was this crazy girl like Harley Quinn, who I could never like. But I was wrong. Turns out I'm the one who's crazy about her. So, I guess I have more in common with the Joker than I first thought.
Why do we have to study logarithms? Will they help us with stockbroking? Surely not. Why suddenly create the X and then force us to find it? And why do I have to prove that it's an isosceles triangle? I see clearly that it is. Duh! Then I received the note back saying, "What are you two talking about?" I just figured that another kid had intercepted it. So with my eyes still glued to my level 3692 of Candy Crush, I scrawled back, "Keep your nose out of my business," and then handed the paper over without looking. Ahem. But your business is taking place in my class. I slowly looked up and saw that it was my teacher. Oh, dang. Busted again. Looking over, I saw Brett with his big guilty face. Ugh, he should have been more careful. Okay, you. And you. Out. You're probably wondering how I'm such a pro at this pose. Well, it's because I've done it 1,000 times. And that serious woman over there is Mrs. Megan, my math teacher. I swear, she totally has it in for me. Okay, let me tell you the story. Once upon a time, there was a girl who, due to an unexpected accident with a trash can and an ill-placed skateboard, ended up arriving a teensy bit late for her exam. But the teacher refused to let her in, and also failed her. Grrr. Yeah, that girl was me, Lexi. Thus, from that moment forth, she became my arch enemy. So, during her boring lecture, I threw a paper plane at the board and said, "Miss, you've spelled arithmetic wrong. I suppose spelling is a bit hard for a numbers person like you. It's okay." Clearly my comment got to her, as during that same class, she picked on me to graph a function. Easy peasy. So I created a masterpiece that made her eyes roll, and the whole class found it hilarious. And as expected, she gave me a lengthy lecture on my childish behavior, and even threatened to call my parents. Poof! Yeah, good luck with that, as unless it involved business, then my parents were practically impossible to reach. Besides, I was just having a laugh. Mrs. Megan needed to lighten up. So I secretly stuck a piece of paper saying "free hugs" on her back. I lurked behind a tree and watched as all these people surrounded her. She looked so bewildered as she tried to navigate past them while having no idea what was going on. The good old days. Suddenly, Brett patted my shoulder and told me 30 minutes had passed and we needed to go back to class. My butt hadn't even touched my chair when I heard a patronizing voice say, "You shouldn't act like that." Ugh, that's Faye, the teacher's pet and a real pick-me girl. Every time the teacher asks a question, she wriggles her arm in the air and squeaks out, "Me! Me! Me!" Mrs. Megan only likes her because she always laughs at her boring jokes. Oh well, I may have no proof, but in my experience, Faye's definitely not as innocent as she looks. Don't say I'm jealous, 'cause I'm 100% not. You probably think I hate school, but it's still way better than my so-called home. Ugh. At least school could be amusing, while my home life consisted of mom and dad locked away in their office 24/7. I can't remember the last time either of them cooked dinner. So takeaway it is. So I'm texting Ben, my super sexy BF. He's been studying in France, and he's back today. I've missed him so much, but unfortunately, I couldn't pick him up from the airport because of, school. And tonight, he has a family party, but we're meeting up tomorrow. Yay! Let me see your face, sweetie. I miss you. You know what? Today, that teacher gave me detention again. Really? She messed with the wrong one, didn't she? Definitely. I will retaliate tomorrow. She'd better watch out. Okay, but don't end up in after-school detention, as I want to see you. My mom's also a teacher, but she's not that much. Oh, by the way, she's here. You want to say hello? Yeah, sure. Ben, it gets on my nerves whenever I think of that Before I had a chance to finish my words, a person popped up on the screen. Mrs. Megan! Lexi? OMG. We both gave each other stunned, open-mouthed stares. It looked like the screen had frozen. Literally. Then just when I didn't think it could get any worse, suddenly a familiar voice broke the silence. Oh, Ben has a girlfriend? Let me see her. Huh? That's Faye! Oh my days, this is too much to process. My two enemies were in the same frame. Shocked, I ended the call. Right after, I received a text from Ben saying, "Don't worry, my mother may look super serious, but she's kind. And the girl is Faye, my neighbor. We've known each other since childhood, and she's cool." This was so crazy. Now I'd have to face them both every day, knowing that they are associated with my BF. Oh, the future is as dark as night. And yeah, this is the beginning of the series thusly entitled Living with My Future Mother-in-Law and My BF's Annoying Female Best Friend. And since then, things at school turned weird. For our class Halloween event, which had a Toy Story theme, Mrs. Megan was in charge of handing out the parts. Faye was Bo Peep, and she had this really cute outfit. While me, I was stuck as Mrs. Potato Head. My outfit was so lame, and one of my googly eyes kept on falling off. Ugh! It was so embarrassing, but I couldn't say anything. I couldn't mess with her anymore, as I still wanted to be with her son. Ugh. Worse still, math class became an endurance test. I was so sick of being compared to that goody two-shoes Faye. Lexi, if you spent more time studying and less time painting your nails, you'd be a top student like Faye. Poof! Faye caught on to what was going on and also started playing tricks on me. One time in class, when I was dozing and Mrs. Megan was correcting the homework, I overheard, "This symbol shows that A is not equal to B." Faye then turned around and whispered, "Just like you, you're not equal to me. And you don't deserve my Ben either." What? Ben is mine, not hers. I bared my teeth and was about to say something when that brat started pretending to cry, saying that I was picking on her. Out! Mrs. Megan came to us with burning eyes. We were walking out when in a sympathetic tone she added, "Faye, you stay." I returned to my meditating pose, but I couldn't shake off my anger. How unfair! Later, when it was lunchtime, Faye walked over to me with a cup of Coke, saying it was a peace offering, and that she was sorry for earlier. This was confusing, but whatever. I took it and was about to take a sip when Brett rushed over waving his arms about. "Lexi, stop!" I saw Faye put soy sauce in it. I was just a second away from yelling at her when Mrs. Megan appeared. I smiled smugly, thinking Faye would finally get into trouble. But to my surprise, Mrs. Megan took a sip of the drink and tried to keep a neutral face as she replied, "There's nothing wrong with it." Really? They went that far to cover up for each other? Whatever. I had a date with Ben tonight to prepare for anyway. That night as planned, I arrived at Ben's house with a somewhat wilting pot plant for Mrs. Megan. I was kinda excited to finally have a cooked meal. Only, when I walked into the kitchen, I couldn't smell anything cooking. Mrs. Megan appeared and rubbing her hand said, "Lexi, you don't mind cooking, do you? It's just been a long week of drawing diagrams. My hand kinda aches." Seeing the situation, Ben immediately came to help, but she reminded him that he'd agreed to fix a pipe or something. To be honest, I'd never touched a frying pan before. But I mean, how hard could it be? I'd make pancakes, though it's not really suitable for dinner, but I'd seen them on a 5-minute crafts and they were clearly a breeze to make. Only, it didn't go to plan. In situations like this, it's important not to panic. But, yeah, I panicked. I needed a plan B. Quick! In a rush, I threw away all the evidence of the failed pancakes and ordered food online. After all, thanks to my workaholic parents, this was my forte. I instructed the delivery person to come to the back door, so Ben and Mrs. Megan would be none the wiser. Expectedly, at the very first bite, Ben and my mother-in-law praised me profusely for my food, and Ben even joked that I should join the next season of Master Chef. Yo, I will rate this restaurant 5 stars for sure. Mrs. Megan suddenly dropped her spoon, so I quickly bent down to pick it up, only she leaned down and whispered sarcastically, "I order from Sydney's too. Their sauces are divine." Oh, busted! Then, halfway through the night, this man showed up and apologized for being late. Turns out he was Jim, Faye's father, but Faye wasn't coming over as she was out with friends. Happy days! I watched Mrs. Megan and him touch a tissue box at the same time by mistake, and then blushed? Huh? Oh, I get it. She liked him. Now it made sense why she was always sucking up to Faye. Have you thought about remarrying? I asked Jim innocently. To the waiting eyes of me, as well as Mrs. Megan, he hesitantly answered, I don't think Faye would like that. Mrs. Megan glumly stared down at the floor. Okay, so I actually felt kinda sorry for her. Besides, matchmaking has always been my hobby, so I decided to help her. I knew that Faye was at a party on Saturday night, so I decided this was the perfect opportunity to play Cupid. I told Mrs. Megan that Jim had something to tell her, so meet him at the Golden Reef restaurant at 7 p.m. Then I told Jim the same. I stood behind a column and watched them share their starter, and then give each other gooey-eyed glances. Then Jim reached out and took Mrs. Megan's hand. They were looking at each other passionately when Faye suddenly rushed in from nowhere and angrily slammed her bag on the table. So this is it? My teacher and my dad? For real?
Faye, why are you here?
Jim stuttered. No one can ever replace Mom! Then she turned to a dumbfounded-looking Mrs. Megan. Turns out you were only being nice to me to get my dad. You're fake. Stay away from us. Mrs. Megan covered her face with her hands, then quickly left. Geez, Faye was brutal. And however annoying Mrs. Megan was, she didn't deserve that. You! Faye shouted. Uh-oh, her gaze fixed on me. It figures you'd be behind this. Keep your big nose out of our family business and start caring about yours instead. Guess this is what lack of parental care does to a kid. I stared at her speechless. Those words should have driven me mad, but for some reason, I only felt sad. And so guilty. I really just meant well. So, first thing at school the next day, I swallowed my pride and went to Mrs. Megan's classroom, where she looked lost in thought as she marked homework. I coughed to clear my throat, then said, Miss, I'm sorry. I honestly was trying to help, but now I realize I should have minded my own business. I'm also sorry for being a jerk in your class. She was silent at first, then replied, It's okay, as I've come to realize that you and I aren't so different. We both have complications in the way of finding love. Guess it's really not easy to get approval from your parents' family, huh? She smiled and gently stroked my hair before continuing. You're such a smart and kind girl, and I always knew you could do better in class, that I must have been too harsh on you. I'm sorry, too. I smiled back at her, and at that moment, I felt like all of our previous conflicts melted away. And I realized that I shouldn't neglect my studies. Instead, I should work hard to become the best version of myself. So, with a lot of hard work, I went from trailing at the bottom of the class to reaching the top spot, even overtaking Faye. Ha! Speaking of Faye, she was still ignoring both me and Mrs. Megan, and never put her hand up in class anymore. But then a rainbow flame experience in the chem lab changed things. Everyone ran out of there when the curtain caught on fire, except for a terrified Faye. Luckily, Mrs. Megan rushed inside to rescue her just in time, and covered her with a jacket as she led her to safety. After that, Faye realized that Mrs. Megan is a good person who cares about both her and Jim. So, through blurry eyes, Faye sobbed out, Thank you so much, and sorry, I was too childish. Please forgive me. A few months later. So, yeah, you see, my wing woman plan worked. And now I have a second family. A really big one. But you know what's the best thing? That is, I no longer have to order food online anymore. 'Cause I will stick to here, and my mother-in-law will cook for me. Hey, it's Haley here again. So, as you've known, Anna has told the whole world the truth about Eric and me. Now, everyone knew that he chose fame over me, and then played with my heart. A lot was going on, and I was so confused. So after a heavy night, I went for a walk to clear my head. And who should I see sleeping in front of Daystar Records but Eric? Even though Eric had just broken my heart again, I couldn't bear seeing him like this. So when he asked to have a talk with me, I softly said, "Let's get you out of here first." I helped Eric walk to the nearby park, and we sat on a bench hidden away in the corner to avoid people's eyes. Eric was still half asleep with his head between his hands, so I went to grab us some coffees. I bought him a cup of latte. How pathetic! After all the pain that he gave me, I still remembered every little fact about him, such as this one, about how he hated black coffee. So I couldn't help but let out a bitter smile thinking about it. I sat down next to Eric, handed him the coffee, and said, "Here, drink it. Then you'll be sober enough to say whatever you feel you need to." Eric took the coffee, but he started talking in a rush, as if he feared I was going to just leave.
Haley, I'm so sorry. I've been so foolish living under the control of others. Well, I should have protected you.
I didn't expect him to start off like that right away. I didn't know what to say. Eric seemed to notice my silence, so he forced a laugh to erase the tense atmosphere and carried on.
How did I even get here while being so wasted? Perhaps it's because my head is always full of you. Haley, I know nothing I do could ever make it all up for you anymore. I don't know what to do. I've run out of energy to live like this. I just want to go back to being a normal, happy teenager who just simply loves music.
Okay, this was strange, as I'd never seen Eric like this before. It's like his whole world had just collapsed at his feet. He has been defeated. I couldn't keep up my cold facade anymore, so in a soft voice I replied, "Eric, you're a strong man. You can get through this and make it right." He looked a bit brighter as he saw me talking to him again, so I continued. "I know we viewed LA as this promised dreamland, but maybe the reality of it is different. It's ruthless out here, but I can honestly say that singing and making music with Phil during this past year has been the happiest time of my life. Eric, I don't know if you share the same feelings, but it seems like LA has turned you into someone you're not and erased the flame in your eyes." Eric looked sad as he sighed out,
Maybe it has.
Whoa, his words surprised me. What happened to the optimistic boy who believed nothing was impossible? The one who always picked me up every time I was lost and upset? That's when I realized he needed my help more than ever in this moment. So I put my hand on his shoulder and said, "Remember that music is our happy place, not our burden. When things are at their hardest for me, I turn to music. So we should never let other things ruin this pure passion of ours. Let's just put aside all the dramas and whatever's between us. I truly hope you will soon find the real you again. Make it worth it, Eric. Because I don't think your 16-year-old self would have wanted you to end up like this." I could tell that my words had hit home. He sat up straight and looked far away with determination in his eyes. I'd said all I needed to say, so I gave him an encouraging smile and bid him goodbye before leaving. "Take care, Eric. I hope to read good news about you soon." That conversation to me was a good closure for our relationship. It's officially over now, no matter what the truth was. I didn't want to be bothered anymore. I've made my decision. Life must go on, and I'd rather put my heart and soul into my music. But then, news of Eric came sooner than I expected, and I'm not sure if it was good or bad. I was having dinner alone at home and channel hopping when I came across an entertainment news on TV that was talking about Eric. The anchor delivered the news that was just in that Eric wanted to terminate the contract with his company. There was even a rumor that during a meeting, he punched his manager, Will. Not only that, but Eric also accused his company of interfering in his private life and forcing him to fake a relationship with Clara. I was so shocked that I dropped my bowl of salad. If he dared to let this out in public, then it must have been the truth, right? Whoa. Exposing his company like this was an extremely risky move, as they were a powerful force. Now what would he do? A few days later, Eric showed up at Daystar Records. I thought he was there to see me, but he said he needed to talk to Phil and wanted me to hear it too. I was confused. What did Eric have to say to Phil? And why did he want me to be a part of it? Eric looked exhausted, and I could see the dark circles under his eyes. He seemed hesitant, as if he didn't know where to begin. Finally, he started telling Phil and me that he wanted to terminate the contract with his company, but he needed Phil's help. Turns out, when Eric let his company know about his decision, they threatened him that if he left them, they would destroy his career path, and every song he had performed would belong to them. It meant that Eric would have to start again at the very beginning to continue following his passion for music. Wow, I knew those people were ruthless, but this was cruel. Still, I was confused as to why Eric was seeking out Phil's help. But then Eric turned to Phil and said,
I was hoping that you'd be able to help, seeing as you composed some of my songs.
What? Phil had written songs for Eric? No one had ever told me about this. Eric continued,
Plus, with your family's influence on the industry, my company probably won't be able to abuse their power anymore. Look, what I'm trying to say is, I know I've messed up, and I've been a jerk to you, but the truth is, I respect everything you and your family have done for the music industry. So, I've come to you as a fellow musician, asking if you can help me get copyright for those songs.
I sat there open-mouthed. Turns out, Phil is the musician who composed some of Eric's hit songs under his stage name. In fact, Phil comes from a family that has a strong position in this industry. His mom is a famous singer, and his dad is a well-known producer. But he never mentioned it because he wanted to earn recognition from people on his own merits. I already knew that Phil also composed music for other artists, but I had no idea that he'd written some of Eric's hit songs. What a mysterious genius! With reluctance, Phil replied,
Eric, I'm sorry, but it's out of my hands, as the copyright of all those songs belonged to the record label the moment I signed the contract.
Eric couldn't hide his sad look, as he thanked Phil and said that he would figure another way out. But then he turned to me and asked if we could talk. I led him into the room next door. Eric sat down next to me and buried his head in his hands.
I'm so sorry, Haley. I've been a coward. Fame turned me into someone I don't want to be, and now I'm trying to put it right. I was so concerned with my career that I'd agreed to Will's ludicrous demands.
He looked at me with sad eyes, then continued.
I naively believed him when he said I only needed to pretend to date Clara for a short time. A week turned into another week, then a month, and there's no excuse for how I treated you. I lost true love for fake fame, and I will be forever regretful of this.
As I listened to Eric, I didn't feel angry toward him anymore. Instead, I sympathized with him. Will manipulated him. He was nothing but a puppet for him to control as he saw fit. But there was one thing I couldn't figure out, so I asked Eric, after the party and the incident with Dean's wife Jane, why did you just vanish like that? He took my hand and said,
Clara was jealous, so she hired people to stalk you, and one of them took that photo of you and Dean. Then Clara showed it to Jane to cause a fuss. I knew she was behind it, so I confronted her, Only, she seemed proud of her actions. She told me if I didn't cut all contact with you, she'd share that picture on the internet, and she'd make it her mission to turn the world against you.
Sighing, I said, "Eric, you should have been honest with me." He said,
I know. I'm sorry, Haley. It wasn't just Clara. It was Will, too. He told me that he would do anything in his power to destroy your career if I continued to see you. Besides, I thought you'd be better off without me. All I've done is caused you pain, and unintentionally damage your career, when all I ever set out to do was protect you.
I was touched, but angry at Eric at the same time by what he told me. I had no clue that Eric had to bear all those pressures alone, just to protect me. He had even been hitted by Kurt. I choked, trying to speak up. Idiot! They can start whatever ridiculous rumors they like about me, but they can never threaten my career. But Eric forced a smile.
I know. You're an unstoppable force. I'm glad you finally know the whole truth. I hope one day you can find a way to forgive me.
It felt good to have cleared the air, but so much had happened between us, and I wasn't ready to move on from that. So I hugged him, wished him the best, and told him that I needed time. The most important thing for Eric right now was to escape from his evil company's control, and I wanted to help him do this if I could. Will was a big name in the industry, and he had a lot of powerful connections, so leaving wouldn't be easy for Eric, as Will would go out of his way to make sure that no other companies would work with him again. Eric and I parted on good terms, and I wished him all the best. Now, it was time for me to focus on myself. Well, that was the plan. But then about a week after that, I was on my way to an event I was performing at, and scrolling through my phone when I saw there was breaking news regarding Eric.